The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all. Good afternoon. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast, The Long Road to Ruin. Yes, the original recipe for podcast deliciousness here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And over there, he only dances Strictly Ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Sean Comer. You're not. How do you do, sir?
It's Long Road to Ruin. It's the mothership, baby, on the Superstation TBS. And we're here to talk about Baz Luhrmann movies while my edible kicks in.
Yes. On the docket tonight is the Red Curtain Trilogy, which all three of these were directed by film auteur Baz Luhrmann, who brought us Elvis last year. Academy Award nominee Elvis. And it consists of Strictly Ballroom, William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and Moulin Rouge, which I finally got all the way through. I tried to watch it last year. See, there's a whole story to this podcast. So Elvis came out last summer. And at the time, when I was writing the schedule back in 1983, because I always, write the stuff ahead of time, we were still doing Synergy. And it was like, okay, well, a new movie comes out. We'll look at an old movie or an old TV show that relates to it, whatever. And so I think what had happened was I was looking for stuff for Pride Month. And I'm looking through the Wikipedia for movies that are on that list. And I see William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet by Baz Luhrmann. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I would not have thought why this would be considered queer cinema. Then I watched it and I was like, oh, that's right. What's his nuts from Oz dresses up as a woman. So like trans. Okay, now I see why it was. Look, there's stuff that makes that list that it's just like one thing in the movie. And like, yep, gay cinema. Here we are. It is what it is. So, but it's a wiki rabbit hole.
It's
the point
a stretch.
Of me telling you this.
Yeah,
way big stretch. So I click on the link to William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and I'm like, this is part of the Red Curtain Trilogy. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And so I see that it's this loosely connected series of movies that Baz Luhrmann did that employ the red curtain technique. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, Baz Luhrmann, he's got that Elvis movie coming up. Great. I will use this and we'll do synergy with that. And then I got Social, and we all know what happens after that. So Sean and I are now playing catch up for the 97 ideas that we had for podcasts back in the day. And this was one of them. When I saw it and I did the research on it, I was like, hey, this is something I really want to do. Now that we're kind of getting back into the swing of doing shows again, Sean and I, like, okay, seems like the perfect time to go back and revisit this idea. So here we are talking Baz Luhrmann's Red Curtain Trilogy, which actually was released as a box set, for those of you that are still collecting those things, of DVDs back in 2002. And the wiki tells us that the films do not form a trilogy in the traditional sense. There's no relationship between the plot and the characters of the three films. Rather, Luhrmann said that the three films followed a specific style of filmmaking. Each film contains a theater motif that reappears throughout the film. Dance is used in Strictly Ballroom, poetry and language, as you would imagine, in Romeo and Juliet, and then song in the third. And so let me take a breath to ask Sean, had you heard of this Red Curtain Trilogy? I mean, I know that everyone, you're close enough in my age that everyone in our age group, or plus or minus 10 years, knows about Romeo and Juliet. But what about Moulin Rouge and Strictly Ballroom?
Okay, Strictly Ballroom I was familiar with in name only, but I had never seen it. Romeo and Juliet, I am old enough to have seen it fairly soon after it hit VHS way back. And Moulin Rouge, I actually have a little bit of a personal attachment to, because when she and I were together, that was one of mine and Alexis's favorite movies. I think we saw it. She might correct me on this, and I will take it on the chin if she does. I think that's one of the ones that we saw in theaters probably multiple times when going on movie dates was something we did super frequently. And I enjoyed the ever loving hell out of it, and I felt kind of bad for the principals because it happened to be up for a boatload of Academy Awards the same year as Fellowship of the Ring. Which actually, now that I think about it, there was some movie that just swept them out of most of them. And I remember young, dumb me being kind of outraged at the time because I thought that Moulin Rouge actually deserved to win a lot of its categories. But and for the life of me, I can't remember what movie it was. But anyway, neither here nor there. But I don't know. I've always found Baz fairly enjoyable, although I've never really sat down and thought about why I kind of vibe with his movies so much in general. I would redirect and ask you this, though. I want to ask you a question. What is it that you think makes the difference between a good / successful adaptation of a stage play or musical and one that absolutely tanks?
I think the beginning of answering that question lies in a simple question about adaptation in general. When you translate something from one medium to another, the most popular being novel to movie, but we do movies to television shows, televisions to movies, movies to plays, plays to movies. And when I say play, I mean I umbrella term for also musicals. I mean fucking Mean Girls. Starts out as a movie, becomes a musical. The musical becomes a movie. But I would say the beginning of that answer lies in, are you doing something different enough to warrant this adaptation? You know, when I think about the musical Les Miserables, which was adapted from the novel The Size of a Small Moon. Have you ever seen this fucking thing? The novel for Les Miserables. It's like, yeah, it's like a telephone book.
God damn it, stick boy.
Yeah, that's what she said. And then you think about, there was a non-musical movie version of it, and there was a movie of the musical. I think in each of one of these translations, you get something different. If you know, I think the idea of like playing with scenery and aesthetic when you're translating something from the written word to the screen comes first and foremost. Sometimes you create new songs when you're retranslating something that was once a musical from the screen back to musical again. So what makes it successful? I would say if you're doing something interestingly enough with the translation, it warrants its existence. And then it comes down to just a matter of competency and craft. I'll give you an example of one that missed so badly, it's comical. And I love talking about it because it's so funny to me. But Cats. Cats was this, so it's adapted from a
Oh
series of like,
God.
it's adapted from a series of short stories. And those short stories were compiled into a loose musical. And why does everyone love Cats? Because a sexy girl in a leotard with a cat tail, because we're all furries inside, jumps into the audience and sits on your lap and gives you a lap dance and then runs away again. I mean, that may have been a bit of an exaggeration of the live Cats experience, but that's more or less what happens. Is you have these wonderful costumes, these great bigger than life dance numbers. You have that song Memories, which everybody knows, and Jellicoe Cats, which have said if you say too many times, Candyman appears and stabs you. So there's just a lot going on with the musical Cats, but it's beloved. I think part of the reason it's beloved is one, I don't know if you've met people lately, but they all have cats. And some of them should clean their apartments. Anyway, I digress. Everyone loves their pets. Everyone loves cats. And you've got catchy songs, great costumes, and an already love for that particular animal. And so this thing has made like $1 zillion. So of course they tried to adapt it into a movie. And with the movie, they tried to give it more of a plot, which didn't really work. And then I don't know why, but it was something about like seeing the costumes close up on screen. They had to do different things with them. And then there was this whole like, should the cats have buttholes or not? And my son's favorite joke, we need to see the butthole cut of cats. Like, I know I stole from, I think, not the Critical Drinker. I think I stole that from Pitch Meeting. In any case, my point being, it's a miss. And it's a miss because I don't think they were able to, and this is something I say very often, and maybe more answer to your question. If you don't know why something's popular, don't rush to adapt it. What ends up happening is, or remaking it. Go ahead and jump in, Sean.
Here's the reason why I ask. I asked because yes, Romeo and Juliet is an adaptation, but Strictly Ballroom and Moulin Rouge are movies that both feel like they would have been more naturally suited to the stage. They have more of the spirit of theater than cinema. But I've heard people say before that they think that there's something that about just the format, the medium of the theater that just doesn't translate well on screen. And I was wondering if you might have a thought as to why it is that a couple of original movies with clearly that kind of spirit and that kind of feel, like Strictly Ballroom and Moulin Rouge, could succeed, whereas something like Cats or the West Side Story remake, or I would probably go ahead and throw Rent in there too, all kind of fall flat on their asses.
So, okay, one, Strictly Ballroom's not really a musical, and we're going to talk about that momentarily. Strictly Ballroom, by the way, my favorite of all three of these. But Moulin Rouge is the example, by far. And I think, going back to Cats, I don't know if you saw my Facebook recently, but I went to 1 or 2 concerts this year. And I've also seen a couple of concert films. In fact, there's a running gag now where my girlfriend keeps saying that Damn You Hollywood should review the new Taylor Swift movie because it was the #1 movie of its weekend and it's making all the monies. And I have to keep reminding her we're a narrative movie review podcast. There's nothing to review in a concert film, at least not the way we do it. But thank you for playing. Total this 3 times now. In any case, but I've gone to see concert films before. I've seen I think I talked about this. I've seen the Big Four, which was Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax. And it's just, you're just sitting, you're sitting in an auditorium. and you're showed a video screen, which if you've been to a concert recently, sometimes you don't get a good shot. You don't get a good view of the stage, but there's video screens around. So you can get a close-up view of your favorite singers on the view screen. And like, you know, now you've paid all of this money to sit in, you know, Raymond James Stadium to watch television. It's fine. There's something about being, and this is the point, there's something about being in the live venue. There's something about being in the live venue experience that is effective. And it sort of lets you forgive the fact that maybe the narrative you're watching doesn't really hold up. Cats being the best example of this. Everyone loves Cats. Everyone loves the song. Nobody really cares if there's no narrative. Because they're there live. It's interactive. The cats are all over the place. It's frenetic. It's busy. We're going to talk about busy when we get to these three movies, by the way. And when you try to take the busy interactiveness of the theater and put it on 2D theater screen, it's not that it's impossible, because it does happen, but it does take away that fourth dimension from you. And I think it lessens the experience. And now you're kind of forced to focus on the narrative, which if you've got a good narrative, and Moulin Rouge does, Moulin Rouge has a perfectly fine story. One that's highly relatable. Why won't you love me? I've given you safety and security. Because I'm in love with the poor artist. So boy, who hasn't been there? Anyway, so it's a highly relatable narrative, and I think it's one you can buy into, whether or not you're enraptured by the theatrical song and dance performances. I would say that's probably the short answer. Is, like I said, there's something about being sitting there in the theater and you feel it. It's in your lap, literally in some cases, versus you're watching it on screen and maybe it doesn't pull you in like it should.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
All right.
Well
so
said, I think.
Who is Baz Luhrmann? So I came to Baz Luhrmann with his Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen music video, which I've talked about this before. I talked about this with Elvis. So it's called Wear Sunscreen, or Advice Like Youth Probably Just Wasted on the Young. Was an essay written as a hypothetical commencement speech by columnist Mary Schmitz. And then the essay became the basis for a successful spoken word song released in 1997 by Baz Luhrmann called "Everyone's Free to Wear Sunscreen," which was number one in Ireland and the UK and inspired numerous parodies. Yeah, this fucking thing was everywhere. But that's how I discovered Baz Luhrmann, who is an Australian filmmaker. He was born in 1962. He is a director, producer, writer, and actor. With projects spanning film, television, opera, theater, music, and recording industry, he is regarded by some as a contemporary example of an auteur for his style and deep involvement in the writing, directing, design, and musical components of all of his work. He is the most commercially successful Australian director, with 4 of his films in the top 10 highest worldwide grossing Australian films of all time. This Red Curtain Trilogy, which we'll eventually get into, is what he is best known for. And following the trilogy, his projects included Australia from 2008, The Great Gatsby, which one of these days, Sean, and I'm going to take a breath so that you can answer me. One of these days, we really do need to sit down and do an on trial for The Great Gatsby. It really deserves its own show.
Ooh. Yeah, it kind of does, because I remember when it came out, everybody was just absolutely pee pants about it. And let me tell you something, Gene Mean. I read The Great Gatsby in high school in my AP English class.
We all did.
I fucking hated The Great Gatsby. I couldn't wait for that fucking great American novel to be over with so we could get on to literature. I would have gone back and read The Grapes of Wrath again before I had to read The Great Gatsby a second time. So I had no fucking interest in seeing it. And also I made no bones about the fact that I think Leonardo DiCaprio might be the most overrated actor of his generation.
I disagree.
which is going to be really awkward in a few minutes when I get to talking about Romeo and Juliet, and I explicitly contradict myself for a moment. But
I'm begging you. I am begging you, go before you make a final decision, Your Honor, about Leonardo DiCaprio's rated or underratedness or overratedness. Please go watch him in Flowers of the Killer Moon. Sorry, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Cinema!
Cinema!
I'm gonna start doing it every single time because fuck you, Scorsese. But no, well, that, and it also kind of suffered from that phenomenon that also kept me from watching Game of Thrones and Sherlock enough times. And this is probably just an individual thing. If somebody hypes something up to me too much and won't shut up about it and won't stop urging me to see it, every single time it gets brought up after that threshold, I think extends it pushes back the point when I'm going to be able to watch it comfortably by at least about 6 months. To date, I have still not seen Baz Luhrmann's The Great Gatsby. Do the math, it checks out. But yes, for something like an on trial, you know what? I will go ahead, double my usual marijuana dosage, and sit and watch the fucking thing at long fucking last. Because I didn't enjoy the novel. I don't sit there and masturbate over the literary greatness of the story. But you know what? If Baz Luhrmann's directing it, I'm at least curious now. And I completely forgot he directed that one. So yeah, I may now be borderline obligated to watch the fucking Great fucking Gatsby. Fuck.
Let me so we can transition to talking about these three movies. Baz Luhrmann, we've been doing these director focuses. We did Jordan Peele, we did Wes Anderson, we did Guy Ritchie, and we're gonna do David Lynch in the not too far future. And we're gonna continue to do these because I really like them, and I think it's we had decided, I think I mentioned this before, we had decided to kind of make Long Road to Ruin at the time somewhat director focused, and then I invented the whole triple feature thing, and it was a better fit. And I want to keep doing it because there's so many great directors out there that I think deserve examination. You know, Ridley Scott, Cronenberg, Quentin Tarantino, who we've done an on trial and for Jackie Brown. But boy, if we don't someday, and we've reviewed The Hateful Eight and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I mean, like, fucking, how have we not talked about Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah. So anyway, my point being that I enjoy looking at these directors and examining their work. And one of the nice things about doing them in bulk like this, like we were specifically looking at the Red Curtain movies, but when we look at, you know, we take 3 of their movies and examine them from different periods, different styles, different aesthetics. A lot of things jump out at me. And with Baz Luhrmann, watching the Red Curtain trilogy, aside from that being the great unifier for these 3, is also how busy his movies are. I think I said of Flowers of the Killers of the Flower Moon, where there are certain scenes that Scorsese directs that seem like a backstage promo from a TNA show, which, for those of you who don't know what I meant, what I just said, it stands for Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. And and I mentioned this during that review, there were times where no one stopped talking and people were walking in and out of the shot. It was total fucking chaos. You couldn't make a word out of what anyone was saying. And then somebody was flexing text at the camera, a guitar, an errant guitar may have flown across the screen. Like, I don't know what coked out squirrel was directing those backstage promos, but they are incomprehensible. And Baz Luhrmann, a slightly defter hand than whoever the coked out squirrel was at Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. But he if he is a master of anything, he is a master of making the busy comprehensible. There is so much going on in any single frame of any one of these 3 movies, with Strictly Ballroom probably being the most reserved and probably the best of the 3. because I am not so easily wooed by spectacle, as the rest of you mere mortals. But because I'm hoity. No, but Baz Luhrmann really has an eye for being able to blend narrative and music, dance in a way that someone writes orchestral music. Like, and what I mean by that is you're able to write for strings, you're able to write for brass, you're able to weave these things together. He is the John Williams of film, is what I'm trying to say. And it shows. I don't think he's, I mean, Elvis did well last year, and it was obviously was nominated for awards. Enough people saw it to make it interesting, but I don't think Baz Luhrmann gets the appreciation in the mainstream that he deserves, because the people that get that recognition make billion-dollar movies, and he doesn't. I think, if I remember correctly, worldwide, Strictly Ballroom made 11 million. Romeo and Juliet made almost 150 million. And granted, that was 1992 and 96, respectively. And then Moulin Rouge in 2001, in the year of our Lord, made almost 180 million. They were all wildly successful based on their budgets, but there's that, and then there's the Russo brothers making, and Infinity War, and it making $1 billion. So the Russo brothers get all the ballyhoo, and Baz Luhrmann is relegated to almost like Guy Ritchie levels of indie filmmaking. And it's like that's he deserves so much more, because he's so talented and his movies are so rich and enrapturing. But that's the world we live in. And I'm going to give you a second to respond to that, Sean. If anyone's wondering, like, seems a little labored, this podcast, there's a 7-second delay between when I stop talking and Sean hears me. So with that said, any final words about, sort of in general, about Baz Luhrmann before we jump into Strictly Ballroom?
Yes, just a quick one. Let me just kind of, in fact, here, hang on one second. Let me just kind of piggyback off kind of what you said. There's a great quote by Michael Eisner, of all people, and I'm going to paraphrase it slightly. I'm probably going to get part of it wrong, but here goes. And when he was heading up Disney, he once said, "Our business, our mission is to make money. In the course of that mission, we may fortunately sometimes luck into making great art." I think that's the biggest difference in the cinema debate. Cinema! Between your Martin Scorsese's and your Baz Luhrmann's, to a lesser extent, and someone like, say, the Russos. What, am I going to deride the Russos for being something they never set out to be? They didn't set out to be auteurs. They set out to make a movie, to make a money. Oh, they made a money. They made them a money.
They made lots of money.
They went to the movie. They went to a movie factory. They did a business. They set out to make a series of movies that people would enjoy madly enough, that they would be enraptured enough with, that they would spend money hand over fist to see it, not just once, but probably twice. And that's why I kind of enjoy that little Joe Russo jab, calling his dog box office. It's like if I look at a 6-inch ham sub from Subway and say, "This is the worst fucking filet mignon I've ever eaten." What am I going to get pissed about? It set out to be a good ham sandwich, not even a mediocre filet. There's no DNA of a filet mignon in there. So it's like when Martin Scorsese talks about how superhero movies aren't cinema. And yes, there's a fine line in art where, yes, you want to make something personal. You want to make something You want to make something expressive. You want to make something that's meaningful and artistically satisfying. But at a certain point, you also want that to connect with people to the point where it also makes money. And yes, different directors follow along different sides of that line. I would dare say in a lot of instances, I think Baz might have almost surpassed Martin in terms of making enjoyable art that, clearly speaks to people, but that also makes money. Whereas on the other hand, I had this brief exchange with Robert Winfrey on Facebook where I flat out asked him, what was the last movie Martin Scorsese made that people talked about extensively after Oscar season was over? And I think he got me with one of them that I entirely forgot he directed. And even right now, I actually can't remember which one it was. But, that's the difference between the two. But the only problem is Martin is the one that keeps screaming at the ham sandwich, why are you not a better steak? You're letting all the other steaks down. Be steak, sandwich. Be steak. And sandwich is just sitting there like, I'm a good fucking sandwich. I'm happy to exist as a sandwich. So, and I'll just close with kind of one more quote, and it's one of the only intelligent things Doug Walker has ever said his entire miserable stain on the internet career. The closest he's ever come to a decent original thought. And that is that movies, especially like Moulin Rouge, are ones where you are supposed to just shut your brain off and just soak in the whimsy. Mm-hmm. Just embrace the whimsy. Let yourself love the whimsy and be loved by the whimsy in return. That is what these movies are. And I'll go ahead so we can go on, but I'm going to have another point that I'm get to. But I want all of you to, in the meantime, ponder the question until I get to it. How are these three movies like a slasher movie? Just think on that a while. I will come back to it. But in the meantime, proceed, Your Honor.
I want to thank you. I want to add one thing before and I'm going to jump right into Strictly Ballroom. After I say this one thing, I'm social and I talk to a lot of people throughout the day. Some are people I'm trying to get involved with romantically. Some are people that I was trying to get involved with romantically that have just become friends. And then there's my podcast people. And I may even talk to my children. Who knows? But I get asked, what are you doing today? How's your day holding up? If anyone's been dating lately, you know how it goes. You text people all day long and everyone wants to know what's going on in your day. And I said yesterday, I was preparing for this podcast. I had to watch all three of these movies before I went to go pick up my kids from school. And no one knew who the hell Strictly Ballroom was except Robert Winfrey's mother. Everyone had heard or seen Moulin Rouge. I was like, oh, I like that movie or whatever. I got not a tepid reaction, but just about good reaction. The one everyone was like, oh my God, you're going to talk about Romeo and Juliet? I love that movie. Like the enthusiasm for Romeo and Juliet was over the top. It was great. Yeah, the Romeo and Juliet and Moulin Rouge really resonated with people. For whatever reason, and I guess we'll get into we start talking about the craft of these movies and the elements. We'll see how those elements resonated with people and how they were relatable. But I was surprised because, again, like I'd seen Romeo and Juliet when it came out, and I only watched Moulin Rouge yesterday. And upon reflection, I can see how people were attached to these movies, but in neither case, I really have to think about how other people would feel about them for me to get over that hump. If you're asking me personally, the one that I resonated with, the one that was most relatable to me, the one that I had the biggest emotional reaction to, aside from one personal quip about Moulin Rouge was Strictly Ballroom, probably because it's the simplest of the three. So let's get into it. We've lost Sean momentarily, but I'm sure he'll be connected and back. So while he's trying to string Dixie cups together so that his internet works, let me go ahead and get into what is Strictly.
I'm back, baby.
Yes, you are. Strictly Ballroom is a 1992 Australian romantic comedy film directed and co-written by Baz Luhrmann in his feature directorial debut. The film is the first in the Red Curtain Trilogy. Strictly Ballroom is based on the critically acclaimed stage play originally set up in 1984 by Luhrmann and fellow students during his studies at the National Institute of Dramatic Arts in Sydney. An expanded version of the play became a success at the Czechoslovakian Youth Drama Festival in Bratislava, in 1986. In 1988, it had a successful season at Sydney's Wharf Theatre, where it was seen by the Australian music executive Ted Albert and his wife Antoinette. They both loved it, and when Albert soon after set up the film production company M&A Productions with his ex-film Australia producer Tristan Mial, they offered Luhrmann their plan to transform his play into a film. He agreed on the condition that he would also get to direct it. This thing was made for a budget of $3 million, and it made, as I said before, a little over $11 million. So wildly successful. 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, the highest of all three of these, believe it or not. And it does not have a cinema score. So what is Strictly Ballroom? Strictly Ballroom follows a cast of dancers, ballroom dancers. We have Paul Mercurio, who plays Scott. We have Tara Morice, who plays Fran or Francesca. And Paul, as we begin the movie, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, not correct me, but remind me, who is the director we all like who likes to do the mockumentaries? Best in Show.
Thank you. I've been trying to remember this all day without actually copping out and looking it up. I know it's not Rob Reiner, because Rob Reiner I don't think did Waiting for Guffman or Best
not
in
even
Show
close. Look it up. And then shout it at me. But we have this beginning that's very much like a mockumentary, and this is actually one of my craft criticisms, and then abandons it almost immediately. But what we're told, so we can get on with the plot synopsis, is that Scott was in a ballroom dance competition in Australia, got boxed in, got fed up, and as we say in the wrestling parlance, went into business for himself and was promptly thrown out of said competition.
It is Christopher Guest.
Thank you, Christopher Guest. Yeah.
I think. Let me double check, but I think it's Christopher Guest. Co-written by Christopher Guest and Eugene Levy, and yes, directed by Christopher Guest. So
yeah, it sounds like a Christopher Guest movie. And so the blonde, beautiful, pain in the ass dance partner is like, I don't want to dance with you anymore. I'm here to win. And his mother is ashamed of him, and he is the prince of the dance studio, but he is disillusioned because he does not want to follow the box steps anymore. He wants to dance what's in his heart, as it were. And nobody wants him to do that. Everyone wants him to follow the rules. He does, he wants to be punk rock, and everyone says no.
The dance school just wants him to do what's best for business.
Yes, sir. And we meet Fran, Fran is every girl you've ever seen in a movie who starts out ugly, but then you take her glasses off and give her some face cream, and suddenly she's fucking Margot Robbie. It's pretty fucking amazing.
Big Rachel Lee Cook vibes.
Yeah, very much. And she is again, classic nerdy girl. She can't find a dance partner. And she sees him just sort of doing his own thing, and she's like, I like what you're doing there. We should do it together. And he's like, ugh, I don't want to drag you and your anchor through everything. But they end up dancing together, and she shows him very much like a Dirty Dancing, Aladdin kind of a thing. She shows him her world, where she's like Spanish and dances the flamenco, and like her people dance a certain way, and he has to learn from them, and he's teaching her his way, and they are blending it together for the best of both worlds. But there is like a corrupt old dance judge trying to keep things very conservative, very much the way they were. And he, if they let him do his own thing, it'll just upset the apple cart and turn everything on its head. It'll be pandalurium. Everyone might be killed. Any case, there's a subplot with his father where he's told his father did the very same thing and ended up losing the dance competition, so he never danced again because guilty feet had no rhythm. And as it turns out, that's not the case. They thought it would be best for business if his wife danced with the judge, and all kinds of bad things happen. Wouldn't you know it? At the very end of the movie, he finally, Scott, having been convinced to first not dance with Fran, do what's best for business, rejects that, goes and finds her, chases after his woman, like you do in any good romance. He chases after his woman. He says, baby, come back. You can blame it all on me. I was wrong, and I just can't live without you. And she says, you're right. And they run in together, and she does a quick change, huzzah, like Lex Luger, and she's in her outfit, and they dance, and then this movie goes completely off the rails. There's like, the judge is like trying to like pull the music off, and all kinds of bad things happen. But they win the crowd over. And the crowd claps hands and makes music for them. And then the kids, they plug the music back in and they dance. And it's wonderful. And there's peace in Israel. And it's just all one. It's great. So that's Strictly Ballroom. Let me tell you, and I'm being funny about it, but
no, dude, that is one of your all-time best summaries. In the decade plus we've been doing this off and on, that might be your masterpiece.
It's that and Halloween Resurrection. No, my defense of Halloween Resurrection, but I highly recommend. I'm gonna go get into what I love about this movie. This is a classic. I mean, I was making fun of it, but I was making fun of it because it's so familiar. But familiar isn't bad. Familiar can be good. It's what you do with it. There's so much earnest in this movie. Paul Mercurio, first of all, looks great. I mean, like, I'm not gay, but he is a good looking dude, and he with a tight abby body, like, holy cow. Like, I wanted to dance with him, and his hair whip, boy, something to behold. He's really great in this. He as a conflicted, like, I don't want to upset my mom, and I don't want the dance studio to go out of fucking business, and I don't want to be hated, but I want to make my art. I want to be happy. I want my life to sing. Don't we all? And everyone around him is unsupportive except for this one girl. And it's like, and it's so funny. Why should we take you seriously? You're not pretty. Man, if there's ever a truth that spoke to the world, it is no one takes you seriously unless you're pretty. But there she is, and she's so full of earnest. She so wants to dance and to be accepted in this world. And she sees the value in her own culture, but the people in that culture are like, why are you running away from us? It's very funny. They're asking her, why are you running away from your culture? His mom and the dance instructors are all asking Paul Mercurio, why are you running away from us? Why are you running away from your culture? And it's to create something new, something wonderful, something unseen, something unbelievable. And that's what the movie's about. That's what I loved about it. Love can be expressed in a lot of different ways, and they don't kiss until the very end of the movie. But you can see the sexual tension rise between them from their first meeting to the kiss at the end. And it's great. The characters are all serviceable for the most part. They're all familiar, but nobody's so out of bounds, coloring so far out of the lines that you're like taken out of the movie. And as somebody who sort of cringes with those sort of Three's Company-esque awkward setups, they never go so far to the point where it got cringeworthy for me. My only criticism of this movie, my only thought while I was watching this was that first act is a little too busy for me. It's very Baz Luhrmann. There's a lot going on. First of all, I don't know who edited the first 20 minutes of this movie, but he also worked in TNA and was coked up, because holy cow, we don't stay on a single shot for too long. Oh, and it's like, this movie was made in 1992. I mean, I know ADHD was a thing back then, but Jesus Christ, was this made for my kids today? It's so fast.
Oh.
And they don't rest on a scene at all. They, it's like they cut from that dance competition to the mom doing an interview back and forth, and they're all over the fucking place. And then they go to the studio and you think, okay, well, that was just the beginning. Let's settle down now. They do the same thing in the studio where they're cutting all over the place. Like, Jesus Christ, slow down and tell your story.
I feel like the first act sets up a kind of movie that Strictly Ballroom never actually becomes.
Yeah. I honestly thought this was a Christopher Guest documentary, and it completely abandons that structure after the first 20 to 30 minutes of it. And I'm like, why did we do this then? Why would you start this way and then go in this completely other different direction? Not enough that it ruins the movie for me, but I thought it was it's not a choice I would have made just because, there should be consistency in your motif and your narrative structure. And when you start off making one movie and then for the last 2/3 you make a whole other movie, like I said this about Candyman 2021, where I was like, please, for the first 2/3 of your movie, tell one story and then keep it for the last third. Don't go into a different movie in your last third of the movie. With the opposite problem here, where the first third is one movie and then the rest of the movie is consistent in tone and aesthetic. And I'm like, why did we need any of this then? Like, you could have gotten to the same place with a what do you call it? With the mom voiceover. I couldn't remember the word voiceover. With the mom doing a voiceover, oh, there's my son. Isn't he wonderful? Don't you like his abs? Don't you like his weird hair swings? And there he is dancing. And oh, look at he's getting boxed in by Ric Flair. And then oh, he's going into his own thing. And this is where it all falls apart, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you understand? He did his own thing. He went and he ran up the down staircase, and now all is lost. And then we're into the dance studio. That would have been fine. We didn't need mom on the couch doing a whole other thing. It's a minor complaint, all things considered, but it still bothers me. The costuming in this is fantastic. It's very colorful and gaudy in all the ways it needed to be gaudy. Have you ever seen a pageant or an arts competition like this, like ballroom dancing? Everyone looks like all the makeup. Everyone looks like they're in the Legion of Doom. It's great. I loved it. It definitely took me to a world that I've never been in before because I've never been a ballroom dance competitor. So let me let Sean in here, but yeah, it's downhill from here. Like, Strictly Ballroom is nuts good. It's so amazing. And then then we get to Romeo and Juliet and Moulin Rouge, and I'm like, ugh, yeah, I want to go back to a simpler time. I want to go back to Strictly Ballroom. We lost Sean again. Good timing, as I was about to hand it over to him, but I'm sure he'll be back with us momentarily. Before he does, all right. As soon as Sean is able to talk to us again, Sean, what did you think of Strictly Ballroom?
Well, let me talk to you. First off, you kind of reference that as being a Lex Luger style quick change. Myself, I more likened it to that episode of Nitro or Thunder that ended with a 6-man between Rick Steiner, Sid, and Kevin Nash against Sting, Goldberg, and Hogan. And Hogan, of course, makes his entrance last, and for the first time in like 3 years, he comes out in the red and yellow to American Made, and Tony Schiavone promptly deposits about 2 billion children in his pants. That feels like the more apt comparison to me. But anyway, generally speaking, you could look at Strictly Ballroom as, ironically enough, kind of a microcosm for the whole box office versus cinema debate. And that's because on the one side, you have these power players who want this kid at a crossroads to kind of go with what's best for the art, what's best for business, what suits the rest of us who are all doing this thing. And it's the status quo, just stay the course, kid. But on the other hand, all art is expressive. All art is personal. All art comes from someplace individual. I don't care if you're talking about Birth of a Nation and Casablanca, or if you're talking about fucking Transformers and Sausage Fest. Everything comes from an idea that somebody was really enthusiastic about and just wanted to give it their all. And so his dilemma is kind of constantly, if I can't do this art my way, if it can't be a part of me, then what's the point of me doing it at all? Just fucking winning trophies? Is that all there is to it? No, I want to do something else. I want to do something different. I want to do something fresh. And what have we been listening to pretty much every day? And it's the most satisfying because it's easily got the most character development throughout the movie. It's got the most layered stories. We actually have a few characters whose arcs we're kind of bouncing back and forth between, as opposed to just focusing strictly on one or two people in their story. And I would even say that whimsical opening sequence, it feels almost like a beta test for Moulin Rouge. It's almost like Moulin Rouge is right there. It's in Baz's head, and it's trying to get out. It's just not quite there yet. It had not yet reached its final Super Saiyan form. But it's satisfying and well-rounded in every possible way because, yeah, he's still conducting the senses like they're an orchestra. He's still absolutely doing that. But he's also demonstrating what I think is a really underrated grasp of narrative, of getting you to care about the characters, saving the big moments for just that kiss that, like you said, is right at the end, and everything just keeps hitting the right satisfying boil as it goes along. And while his other movies would be great, I would go so far as to say that from what I've seen so far, I don't know that he's made one that's all around better than this. It's like something that I read someone say about Jay-Z the other day, saying I could name you rappers with better lyrics. I can name you rappers with better flow, better presentation, better personality, but I can't name you someone who's got all of them in one package like he does. That's this movie compared to all the rest of them. Moulin Rouge might have had the energy and the songs, but it didn't quite have the satisfying immersive plot. Romeo and Juliet might have had you called it you meant to say pandemonium, you called it pandelirium. I think that's what I'm going to start calling Baz Luhrmann's movies. They are pandelirium. They are just an all-encompassing dream state.
That is
Romeo and
pandelirium is a line I copped from Jeff Foxworthy. He was making fun of a redneck who was responding to a tornado.
Well, fucking broken clock. Fuck. Now I actually got to give a member of the Blue Collar Comedy Tour their due. God damn it. And today was starting off so well. Anyway, no, that kind of has the true dreamy aesthetic of it, but Strictly Ballroom gets it all in just the right levels. Highly recommend.
To conclude, and then we'll jump into Romeo and Juliet. I love Baz Luhrmann. I would watch more of his. I pitched doing The Great Gatsby. I clearly am on board for the celebration of opulence that is a Baz Luhrmann movie. Two things about that. One, I was saying of Moulin Rouge. I said this in our group chat yesterday. I said that Moulin Rouge is opulent, busy, and tragic. And I think these are all things that are interesting to Baz Luhrmann, because they show up in all three of these. to one degree or another. And Strictly Ballroom is the least opulent of the three. And I think that's its great strength, that less is more. It is the most focused on solid storytelling. It is the least focused on aesthetic and set design. And like I said, just a celebration of opulence, which leads me to my second thing. Baz Luhrmann, we were talking about this with Wes Anderson, and I can't remember who else we brought this up with, where Robert, there was a director we were talking about, and Robert was like, I think he might have actually been talking about Baz Luhrmann, now that I think about it. Yeah, because he was talking about The Great Gatsby. You have to be very careful when you're looking at extravagance and opulence, because there's a tendency to glorify it. There's a tendency to sort of hero worship it and not examine it critically. And I think that's where Baz Luhrmann sort of falls down with Moulin Rouge once we get to it, and The Great Gatsby and whatnot. Definitely with The Great Gatsby. And I'm bringing this up because it's funny, because when we talk about Wes Anderson, like Wes Anderson has clearly lived among rich white people and said, "Oh boy, like there's some decent ones here, but there's some shit going on here, and I need to talk about it." Baz Luhrmann doesn't really do that. Baz Luhrmann goes, I don't know if it's that he's lived amongst the rich whites, and he was like, isn't everything about being rich and white awesome? Or he desperately wants to. He has watched it from afar and goes, that's it. That's what I want. And when I get there, I want to celebrate it. And it's like, I wish more people had seen Babylon, because for all of its faults, Babylon was really, really great at taking a critical eye to the golden age of Hollywood. It was something to behold and to talk about busy movies. It was something to behold and to celebrate, but also to be critical of. It's like, here's why everyone thinks this is wonderful when you're standing 100 yards back, but when you stand up close, here's what's wrong with it. And that's great. That's what I want. And Baz Luhrmann doesn't seem to have that level of criticism, which is frustrating. And with Strictly Ballroom, it's there, but he's looking at something very specific. He's looking at ballroom dance competition, and he's saying, hey, there's people who are very conservative about this, and there are people that are very progressive about this. And I'm showing you that, and I'm telling you this romance therein. Great. Those are three legs on a stool that all work. And that's why it's the best of the three. Mm-hmm. And then he ran away from it screaming. Like, I no longer want to have an editorial opinion on anything. I would like to show you my bejeweled penis. Here it is. Like I don't go back to criticizing things. I don't want to see your bedazzled penis. No, bedazzled penis. Like, all right. And then, Moulin Rouge. Now it's a bedazzled penis that sings. Like, oh God, Baz. Don't make me wish Wes Anderson were here and have him tell me about aliens for 8 hours. All right. When I say bedazzled penis, that is the phrase that pays. That means move on to the next thing. Romeo Juliet. You okay there, Sean?
Get myself back to earth.
Okay. All right. People listening, friends of mine who might be listening to this worker while they're driving, it was like, I didn't tune in to hear him yell that. I really didn't. Romeo and Juliet.
Well, look, you're getting the bedazzled penis anyway, and you're gonna like it, goddammit.
Boy, if I had a nickel,
starving children in China have no bedazzled penis.
If I had a nickel for every time I said that to an unassuming young lady. Anywho,
Please the 1990s to an unassuming Chinese lady.
It's a 1996 romantic shut up crime film directed, produced, and co-written by Baz Luhrmann. It is a modernized adaptation of William Shakespeare's tragedy of the same name, albeit still utilizing Shakespearean English, which stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Claire Danes as the aforementioned Romeo and Juliet. It stars Brian Dennehy, John Leguizamo, Miriam Margolyes, Harold Perrineau from Oz, Pete Postlethwaite, Paul Sorvino, and Diane Verona. It is the third major film version of the play, following adaptations by George Cukor in 1936 and Franco Zeffirelli in 1968. Excuse me. It won all kinds of fucking awards. It won, and I'm just going to stick with the Academy Awards. It was nominated for Best Art Direction, which it did not win. But major movies that it won some Blockbuster Entertainment Awards, some British Academy Film Awards, and it won Claire Danes in an example that people don't know what the fuck they're doing at MTV. Won Best Female Performance at the MTV Movie Awards, and I will get to that in a moment. It had a budget of $14.5 million. It made $147.6 million. So wildly successful before every movie had to make $1 billion. We all know the romantic comedy, the slapstick comedy that is Romeo and Juliet. Warring families have spoiled asshole children who accidentally find each other and fall in love to the detriment of everyone. Claire Danes fakes a suicide. Juliet fakes a suicide. Romeo believes it's a suicide, kills himself. Then she wakes up and goes, "Ha! I fooled everybody. Shit! I fooled him so good that he killed himself. Well, I'm going to kill myself too." And the families go, "Maybe there was a better way of handling this." And that's Romeo and Juliet. We read this fucking play in high school, people. Let me go forth and say it was a nice idea. I get why people like this a lot. I remember I saw this in 1996 in the theaters. And go ahead, Sean.
Oh, I was literally just coughing. I'm sorry. I'm getting a respiratory bug.
Okay. So I like the idea of a modernized adaptation. I still laugh though because it's so awkward, it's so stupid, and I get what Baz Luhrmann was going for, but I don't know why I have to say this in the year of our Lord 2023, but guns aren't swords. The way you operate a sword is not the way you operate a gun. It will have two. It will have two different results when brandished. It will have. There's two different expectations when you point a sword at someone and when you point a gun. And when you're adapting scenes where a sword was used to threaten somebody and you try it with a gun, it doesn't work nearly as well. It's a weird quibble, and probably one people don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but watch this again and think about the scenes where they're pulling guns on each other and think, well, those were supposed to be swords. And it's kind of stupid. It's one of the few things about this movie I really didn't like, just because it kept taking me out of the movie. But again, if you're not watching it critically and you don't care, you don't understand that guns and swords are not the same, you're probably not even going to notice. So that's a very film snob kind of a thing for me to say, but it is what it is. The color paletting in the music in the movie is very nice. I swear to God, Baz Luhrmann has one mansion and he uses it in all of his movies now. That same fucking mansion from the party is in this. It's in Moulin Rouge. It's in Great Gatsby. I swear to God, it's the same mansion every movie. It shouldn't be called the Red Curtain. It should be called the Mansion Movies. Anyway,
Robert Rodriguez can do it.
I suppose that's another one we have to do. We should do a focus on, but that's not right this second. In any case, I like the cinematography is very well done. The set design is very well done. The costuming is one of the best things about this movie. It's a very pretty movie to watch. Leonardo DiCaprio seems, and there's a reason why I'm saying it this way, seems like he has a handle on the material. And Shakespeare can be burdensome, can be unwieldy for many people. It's kind of like, when you ask somebody to read the Bible, and like somewhere in there is some good advice that I have to now pull out of this wildly unwieldy language. And Shakespeare kind of works the same way, where you're kind of sometimes looking at this going, I know what you're trying to say. I wish you had gotten to it. It's like Tolkien. I wish you had gotten to the point 20 sentences or pages earlier, because holy shit, is this dense. So
it just doesn't. It just isn't something that feels like it's meant to be read cover to cover.
Yeah, Shakespeare can be enjoyed as poetry, as narrative dialogue. oi. And I understand, like, these were once plays, you Luddite. I get that. But again, watching a stage play of people speaking in a sing-songy, somewhat extended way versus watching Leonardo DiCaprio sort of cut and slash his way through some extended dialogue. Like, he's just trying to tell Claire Danes she has a nice ass. Like, and it takes him forever to get there. And this is my point. Like, he's good enough that he pulls it off. Harold Perrineau is good enough that he pulls it off. A lot of the humps in this movie are not so good. They great comic reactions to having guns pulled on them, but they're struggling with the dialogue. But the one who I noticed it the most with is the block of wood named Claire Danes, who's a fine actress normally. I don't know if Baz Luhrmann just didn't sit with her and be like, now, Claire, here's what's happening in this scene. Here's your motivation. Here's what you're saying with all of this. Or if he was just like, read the lines, monkey. And she did to the best of her ability. But Leonardo DiCaprio is talking to a block of wood, and the wood is, it's like he's talking to ChatGPT sometimes in this movie. And she's just responding in kind, but like, it's a lot of her intonation is flat. I was having a conversation with a girl yesterday who really loves this movie, and we were talking about her very wooden performance, and we both said, that may have been what they were going for, because if you've ever talked to a young gal, they can sometimes be shallow and vapid, and it comes out in the way they speak and the way they think about things. And that might have been what she was going for. It didn't translate well that way, though. Like, I think I said she should have come across as flighty. Actually, that was it. It was this. Her performance should have been more vapid and shallow. It come across as flighty, and almost use the word whimsical. She should have come across as almost a whimsical, weightless. It's sort of, the weight of what's happening to them should slowly be crashing on her. Instead, it's just like, in this scene, I'm being coy, and in this scene, I'm flirty, and in this scene, I'm falling apart, and in this scene, I'm dead. And I don't feel like I'm watching a character. I feel like I'm watching an actress do the best she can to recite the line she was given. And Claire Danes, I think, is a talented actress, but I don't think she had her mind wrapped around the material as well as what was needed. What did you think of Romeo and Juliet, Sean? Or you want to respond to any of what I just said? Or not? Or continue to have trouble with your internet? It's fine. Until he comes back, let me just add to that. Not enough Brian Dennehy in this movie for me. Get the other guy. I think it's Paul Sorvino. You get a lot of him. And the scene where he's like verbally abusing Claire Danes is pretty rough to watch. But I wish we had gotten more Brian Dennehy. I specifically wish we had gotten more Brian Dennehy in a West Virginia Sheriff's Office uniform. But that's just me. Go ahead, Sean.
I got an interesting question for you, because this is something that occurred to me while I was watching this again for the first time in years.
Mm-hmm.
You know who I think is a better Juliet than Claire Danes in William and Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet?
Who, Sean?
Drew Barrymore in Ever After.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
I don't know what it is that she was. Maybe you could even help me out here and bounce off me here with this. It just, when I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that there had to have been someone he would have had better chemistry with. And she was the one that kept popping to mind. And the more I thought about it, the more I went. I kind of thought about the just breathe moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one from Ever After that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who's seen it is going to know. And I kind of think that actually feels like more of a Juliet moment than I think just about anything Claire Danes had in this movie. And yeah, taking nothing away from her in general, she's an outstanding actor. And she definitely would have been more age appropriate than Drew, I think. But it felt like in this complete other movie, Drew captured more of what I think Claire was going for in terms of personality. I don't know if that's coming across clearly at all. I kind of doubt it is.
No, I mean, I it's been a while since I've seen Never After, so I kind of see what you're saying. But I'm thinking about, I think Drew Barrymore is a more capable actress than Claire Danes. And I think,
without question. Yeah.
I think Drew Barrymore at the right age. The other thing that was brought to my attention is that Claire Danes is supposed to be playing, in theory, a 14-year-old girl. And I think that's half my problem is that there are better actresses. There are actresses better at doing 14-year-old girls than Claire Danes is. Like I said, I think Claire Danes, why I said this of Cameron Diaz in the Gangs of New York last week when Robert and I talked about Killers of the Flower Moon. There was a question like, why would you cast Cameron Diaz in Gangs of New York? And I said, because she was the it girl of the time. Why would you cast Claire Danes in Romeo and Juliet? Because she was the it girl at the time, which does speak to a problem Hollywood has, because men get cast most of the time, like 70 to 30%, versus 30. 70% of the time, I think men get casted on their ability. 70% of the time, women get casted on their looks. They are.
What was the Carrie Ann Moss said? Something like when she turned 35 or 40 was when she, on her birthday, she got an offer to play like a grandmother. Something like that.
Yep. And so I think they're like, who should play opposite Leonardo DiCaprio? And the question isn't who's capable, it's who looks pretty next to him, because Leonardo DiCaprio is a pretty boy, especially back in 1996. So who looks pretty on the poster next to him? Okay, but can she do can she do Shakespeare? And it's like I can almost picture the conversation. Can Claire Danes do Shakespeare? Look, like, we're not getting Meryl fucking Streep for this. Calm the fuck down. Like, we're looking for a hot girl.
I think she could handle Shakespeare. It's just that in this particular role, she's going for doe-eyed, almost Pollyanna-ish romantic Juliet, and she's coming across as just a particularly dense young adult.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's Leonardo DiCaprio doing a ventriloquist act, and the puppet is Claire Danes. What else about this movie, Sean?
All right. Well, I'm glad you kind of mentioned the guns versus swords thing, because it's in terms of narrative logic, you're talking about what's supposed to be a very personal blood feud, and you're having them fight with the most detached weapons you possibly can. You're not even bringing melee weapons into the fray. You're just going to fucking firearms. Like I said, DiCaprio is great in this. He is magnetic. He is the reason to watch this movie. Keep in mind, I never said that he wasn't gifted. I just said I think he's overrated. That's all. Like you said, he clearly has a grasp on the material, and it feels like Claire Danes as an overall performer is just about on his level, but this was him clearly kind of shooting past her to a higher peak than she would ever ultimately reach up to this point. You talk about this, you have to talk about the soundtrack, because Moulin Rouge made better jukebox musical style use of its anachronistic selections. But with this, you have that rare gift of a soundtrack that isn't just pushing hit singles. You've got contemporary artists and contemporary flavor, but it's contributing to the storytelling. It's contributing to the narrative. It's not just some random ass forgettable rap rock shit that's playing in the background of Street Race number 427, 50 minutes into the Fast and the Furious. That's gonna be forgotten as soon as the fucking song's over. This is more like I've Got Five on it in Us, or the Desperado soundtrack, something like that. But again, and I'm not quite to my point yet, but again, I'm going to ask you to reflect on the question. How is a modern day retelling of Romeo and Juliet like a slasher movie like Scream, Halloween, My Bloody Valentine, any of the above? Because there's a thread there. And I will get to it, but just keep that question in mind.
Okay. With that said, and do I recommend Romeo and Juliet? Yeah, I actually thought about showing this to my kids. I'm not entirely sure my son would be up for it, but I definitely think my 12-year-old daughter, my 12-year-old
Lily would dig it.
Yeah, I think she gets it. I think she would dig it. I don't think she would be as critical as, her almost 50-year-old grumpy father. But I do think that Romeo and Juliet, more so than I think Moulin Rouge or Strictly Ballroom, was made for budding film children. Like, if you've got tweens and teens and you're like, we need to sit you down and, all right, let's put this Marvel and the Star Wars down for just a minute. Let's get you away from the anime. If we could just stop watching My Hero Academia for just a minute, and let's introduce you to cinema. I think Romeo and Juliet's a good place to start. Cinema. I think Romeo and Juliet's a good place to start with, and I'm not just kids, but if you've got somebody who's, their relationship to the theater is it's mild distraction, and you want to say like, yeah, but you should really start to appreciate the art that comes from the theater experience. A good place to start is probably Romeo and Juliet. I think Baz Luhrmann as an experimental film, I think this works. I don't think it's a miss. I think it's on a, as Robert would say, on a pass-fail scale. I think it's a pass. There's just some like tweaks and some, let's get a different actress in there. Let's not maybe do the guns. Let's do something else. I always think it would have been funny if they had the swords, or at the very least, like do lightsabers. Like that would have been awesome. Could you imagine? It's 1996 and Leonardo DiCaprio's pulling a fucking lightsaber on John Leguizamo. Be great.
Right. I will say this. John Leguizamo never has, nor sadly, I think, will he ever get credit for just what an amazing all-around performer that man is.
You took the words out of my mouth. You want to talk about you talk about somebody who's underrated and underappreciated. It's John Leguizamo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That guy, if Leonardo DiCaprio is the reason to see this movie, I would dare say that I could say this about the entire rest of the supporting cast, to be honest, but particularly Leguizamo is like probably 1A for me. Like I love watching it. I love watching him that much.
Yeah, he's really good in this. But John Leguizamo is consistently good in almost anything he does. Like, he is definitely an actor who, if someone thinks he's bad in something, he's probably not bad. The material he was given was bad, and he's doing his level best. Because John Leguizamo is a brilliant actor. All right, and then finally, to conclude our look at this Red Curtain trilogy, we are looking at Moulin Rouge from 2001. Is a 2001 jukebox musical romantic drama. It follows a young English poet Christian, played by Ewan McGregor, who falls in love with the star of the Moulin Rouge cabaret actress and courtesan Satine, who is played by the brilliant and vivacious Nicole Kidman. I want to just quick stop and just, I need a minute, because I don't think, you talk about underrated yet again. I don't think Nicole Kidman is really appreciated for how brilliant of an actress she is.
Yeah.
I think Nicole Kidman gets saddled with, weren't you married to Tom Cruise? And, I kind of got in Evan's shit about this yesterday because, Evan's Evan. For those that don't know, he's the guy I do comic strip with. He's done a lot of Jesse's podcast. He does the Snap material with Jesse. Evan's great. We all love Evan. And Evan is very funny. Evan's good for a good one-liner or a pun. But he can sometimes sort of irk my chain because I'm trying to make a point about something and Evan comes in with a crack. And sometimes the crack I can just ignore, and other times I'm like, oh God, your crack is frustrating me because while you're being innocent about it, you're pointing to something that is a big frustration for me, and I kind of take it out on him. That's what happened yesterday. So I go, I'm talking about how I'm like gushing about Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge, and Evan goes, "Isn't that Aquaman's mom?" And I had to copy and paste her wiki into our group chat, as she's won all of these awards and she's had all these brilliant performances and she's done these amazing things. But I think when people think about Nicole Kidman, they don't think about. I was talking about this with Meryl Streep. When
she is her generation's Meryl Streep. That is who Nicole Kidman fucking is, and he remembered him as Aquaman's mom.
Yeah, it really like I beat up a poor Evan, but it really aggravated me. And I don't think he understands why. But that's my point. Like when I talked about Meryl Streep and how brilliant she is, when Alexis and I reviewed Only Murders in the Room 2 weeks ago, I talked about how Meryl Streep doesn't get a lot of play on this network because Meryl Streep's not in anything we watch. And we tend to, we tend to be firmly entrenched in the nerd culture. And like I'm branching out here and there with certain people, but for the most part, that's what we're covering. I mean, last night they reviewed Five Nights at Freddy's. So again, we don't do a lot of like the Meryl Streep stuff. So I don't get an opportunity to watch or say how brilliant she is. And I think that's the problem with Nicole Kidman is we're not doing a lot of what she does. And so we miss out on a lot of really great Nicole Kidman stuff. And it bothers me, like I'm really caught up in this thing about only certain movies get a lot of attention now, and then everything else is sort of subject to the long tail and compartmentalized water cooler conversation. Everything is we're all so isolated from each other, both physically and culturally, that great unifying water cooler conversations aren't happening the way that they used to. And so a lot of stuff that's awesome out there gets missed, and then we say things like there's nothing good out there. No, it is. It's just not everyone sees it, not everyone's talking to each other about it, and so it feels like it doesn't exist at all, because when a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't make a sound. So I just needed to say that about Nicole Kidman. She vastly, in the year of our Lord 2023, vastly underappreciated. And maybe again, this was made in 2001 when she was one of the it girls. And maybe back then people were talking about her, but that now it's the year 2023, and that may have been lost to the sands of time. And so here's this podcast going, remember Nicole Kidman and the Alamo. All right. So with that said, the film uses the musical setting of the Montmartre quarter of Paris. I probably did not pronounce that right. And is the final part of Luhrmann's Red Curtain Trilogy. It's a co-production of Australia and the United States. It features an ensemble cast of Nicole Kidman, Ewan McGregor, John Leguizamo, Jim Broadbent, Richard Roxburgh, Jacek Koman, and Caroline O'Connor. Okay, so this was made on a budget of $50 million. It made almost $200 million. Lady Marmalade was the big single that came out of this. It was about the only thing I knew about it at the time. People love that single. As far as it was nominated for every award on the planet. It won Best Art Direction at the Academy Awards, and then it won Best Costume Design, but it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actress, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Makeup, and Sound. It won a bunch of Australian Film Institute Awards, won some British Academy. It won Best Motion Picture, or Musical, or Comedy. It won for the Golden Globe. Nicole Kidman won a Golden Globe for Best Actress, and Best Original Score, Craig Armstrong. And then it won a bunch of satellite awards. So What is Moulin Rouge? Well, in this story, we meet a poor writer, because all writers are poor, and Ewan McGregor, and he begins an involvement with the local cabaret, the Moulin Rouge, and where he meets Nicole Kidman, who is promised to, what is it, a duke or something? And she, in a very Three's Company-esque moment, she thinks he's a different guy, so she throws herself at him. And because a pretty girl paid attention to a shy boy, the shy boy is now madly in love with her. This is how trauma bonds form. So there, and then she's like, shit, you're the wrong guy. I'm supposed to be with this other guy who has money. And so the guy with the money is like, right, I have money, I have security, I'm giving you everything you want, I'm going to show you love and attention, and, love me back. Really, it's not a tall ask. And there's for Ewan McGregor going, but you paid attention to me once, so now I'm in love with you, and I can't stop myself. And she's like, well, you love me, so I love you back. and therein lies the tension there. And it just sort of goes and goes and goes. She's stricken with quote unquote consumption, so she's dying. And then in a very Shakespearean way, the play is the thing. They do this musical that Ewan McGregor has written, but the whatever he is is like, no, I don't like it that the sitar player wins the poor sitar player wins in the end. Make it so that the Maharaja wins in the end. And Ewan McGregor nearly gets killed. In the end, he ends up being with Nicole Kidman, and then Nicole Kidman dies, and that's the movie. As far as plot synopsis go. It's my least favorite of the three. It's good. I enjoyed it. Like I said it was busy. I was opulent, busy, and tragic. It's weird that I kind of identified with the villain of this thing, and I felt bad about myself. But the idea of here I am, a man providing support and structure and love and safety, and that's not enough for you. You need romance. Like, ugh. Fine, go be poor, whatever. Hope you like rat sandwiches. Anywho, I know that's not really how you're supposed to relate to this movie, but I feel like this guy's listening to this going, "We hear you, brother." We've all been there. And in any case, never mind my sad personal life and getting back to the movie. It's a gorgeous looking movie. Nicole Kidman's great. Ewan McGregor's great. Nicole Kidman is like miles above Ewan McGregor in this thing, by the way. She almost like outshines him. But then again, Ewan McGregor kind of plays a mouse, so I think he plays a mouse very well.
Yeah.
I mean, one criticism about this movie, and you use the term like jukebox musical, which is fine. I understand Smells Like Teen Spirit was a #1 single for what seemed like the entire decade of the 90s, but fucking stop already. Poor Kurt Cobain. Poor murdered Kurt Cobain. He writes this song, he puts out this album. It's very much standing in the face of everything that the 80s was, much like how the Ramones and the Sex Pistols were a rejection of Journey and Foreigner. And yes, there's Kurt Cobain and Nirvana rejecting Poison and Motley Crue and Def Leppard. And and then there's that song Smells Like Teen Spirit, where you're mocking capitalism and you're mocking consumerism. Let's now make that a product and start putting it into things like Pan and Moulin Rouge. Like, ouch. Twist the knife. Like, I'm not, I am firmly entrenched in the punk rock culture, as it were, and the philosophies therein. But I don't get so precious about it that I go, okay, no, it's fine to use Holiday in Cambodia in your Holiday Inn commercial. I don't care. However, certain things I'm just like, ooh, this really upsets me. And I think because I still have PTSD from fucking watching Pan and having the kids fucking chanting Smells Like Teen Spirit. With our hearts out, entertain us. Here we are now. Entertain us. And then they're doing it again, and this only slightly more upbeat. With your heart out, entertain us. Here we are now, entertain us. So, jazz hands. I'm like, ugh. There was not a. We couldn't do "Call Me" by Blondie. You know, we couldn't do "I Love Rock and Roll" by Joan Jett. We had to do "Smells Like Teen Spirit." Fuck off. All right. So, other than that, it's the busiest movie out of all of them, and this is what I mean by like it's like watching a TNA backstage promo where everyone's just talking over each other, and it's all rapid fire, and it was edited by a coked out squirrel, and it's a lot to throw at you, and it doesn't stop. Like there's a couple of moments throughout the movie of some quiet reflection, and other than that, it's like being in a really gay Marvel movie. Like I'm just being bombarded with shit. Like slow down. Doesn't anyone think? Like I long for a Kevin Smith child taking a shit moment. Like anyway, the Moulin Rouge. Your thoughts?
Oh, breathe, motherfucker, breathe. All right. Again, feast for the eyes and ears. It's frenetic. It's nonstop. It's imaginative. He's certainly doing something that I can attest was unlike anything else that was in theaters at that time. That was unlike virtually any other movie adaptation of a musical. Like I think up to a certain point, Moulin Rouge and Chicago were pretty much the standards by which cinematic musicals and that whole kind of semi-revival could be set. If you can believe it, the movie based on the Bob Fosse musical is fucking more restrained than this. And yes, it is very much carried by the fact that you just can't take your eyes off Nicole Kidman. Ewan McGregor is, he's a dope, but he's a lovable dope. He's a cuddly dope. And again, he was also pretty much at the height of his post-train spotting powers in this. Again, John Leguizamo somehow disappears into a role to the point where you never think for a second that you're not watching a fictionalized version of Toulouse-Lautrec.
I was going to say, I don't remember when Pest came out, but I feel like Baz Luhrmann was shown a clip of Pest. It was like that guy. And then John Leguizamo comes in to do the audition or whatever to get the role, and they're just he's like, "Well, how do you want it, boss? Like, you want me to do this? You want like no, be your character from Pest. That's what you're here for, John. I need you to be Pest, but put a top hat on." He
is the best Tim Burton character to never star in a Tim Burton movie.
Caught you not wrong.
Because hand to God, when Big Fish gets remade eventually, because it's eventually gonna happen, and Danny DeVito is just not gonna be up for the part because he ain't getting any younger. I seriously, John Leguizamo gets my vote to replace him. But here's where I come back to the question where I'm finally going to answer it. What all three of these movies kind of have in common, story-wise, they are not original. They're predictable. They're by the numbers. You have definitely seen this movie before. But much like a slasher movie, it's not about necessarily innovation in terms of your narrative and your characters and what actually happens. It's about iteration. It's about performance. And it's about the fact that in all three of these movies, Baz Luhrmann took formula, frankly, pretty hackneyed formula that we've all seen before, and brought it to the screen in a way we had never seen before. And that was what drew us in. Any production of Shakespeare, I don't care if it's modern or traditional or what have you, it's going to be all about the players, not some kind of sudden invented twist in the story. There's a great moment from one of Napoleon Bonaparte's Ultimate Fighter videos, or Ultimate Fighter history videos, where he's showing the footage from scene 2 where Rich is leading the Bible study, and he all of a sudden pronounces, you see, Moses dies at the end of Deuteronomy, and Napoleon just blurts out, for fuck's sake, spoilers, Rich. No spoilers needed. We know what's going to happen. But each time he makes a movie, it's what Stephen King called the gotta in Misery. I've gotta make some time to know exactly what he's going to do with this that's gonna be really fresh. It's why he was the right guy to make Elvis, because he wasn't going to make just another musician's biopic. He was going to make something that was going to be unlike the rest of the crop. That wasn't going to be like Ring of Fire, Ray, Rocket Man, Bohemian Rhapsody, any of it. He was going to make a distinctly auteurish Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie. And no matter what, you were at least guaranteed something fun, even if it wasn't going to have much substance. And that's what I love about the Red Curtain trilogy is, yes, they can be hit or miss sometimes, but each time you can still walk away from the movie knowing you enjoyed it, and that if you saw it on somewhere else, you would watch it again. And sometimes that's the best thing you can ask from anything. So,
okay, I think we got it. Baz Luhrmann is a director people should pay attention to. Everyone should watch his movies. I have not seen Australia yet, and I'm really going to push myself to, if we don't, sometimes I got to put something on a schedule just so I can watch it. But yeah, Sean and I will huddle up and we'll figure out, maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe we'll do an on trial at some point for The Great Gatsby. And I think, we just might sit down and figure out someday when I can sit down and actually just watch Australia. But Baz Luhrmann, again, if you're looking for some better quality film in your diet, look no further than Baz. He's a director worth paying attention to. And it's not like he's making, we're like in about a month or so, we're going to be talking about David Lynch. It's not like he's making those kinds of movies, or Cronenberg, where everything's fucking gross. Like he's making crowd appealing, like musical, the theater movies.
That's exactly. You refer to Romeo and Juliet as a movie for budding film kids. That's the great thing about a director like Baz Luhrmann or Robert Rodriguez or a lot of others for that matter. Mm-hmm. And that's the fact that it may not be high art, but number one, they're making the kinds of movies they would want to go see.
Yeah.
And that passion is right there. And as a result, most importantly, they're making movies that while they may not be Goodfellas, Marty, or A Bronx Tale, Marty, or Taxi Driver, Marty, they're movies that will inspire someone else to want to go out and make movies themselves.
Well said.
Again,
okay.
What's more important?
Yep. All right, so that is our Long Road to Ruin on the Red Curtain trilogy. I really enjoyed this. I'm glad we went back and sort of picked through stuff in the discard pile and brought it back so we can talk about. This was roughly an hour and 40 minutes well spent. Last night, I ducked out to go do karaoke, and you can hear me caterwauling on my TikTok. Right now, me singing Big and Rich's Kick My Ass is up. Tomorrow, Danzig and the day, Mother by Danzig, and the day after, because I was wearing this shirt, Rocky IV, if he dies, he dies. So I was like, because everyone needs a gimmick, so I sang Eye of the Tiger. And considering my cracking voice and stuffed nasal passages, I got through it as best I could. But the occasion where my voice cracked, I'm not a professional singer. I try my best. Karaoke's fun. And you can see that on my TikTok, where I am at Mark Radulich on TikTok. But I didn't come here to tell you all that. The reason why I brought it up was I wasn't on Damn You Hollywood last night. Alexis Hayne, originally I bowed out because they were going to have 4 panel members. It was going to be Alexis, Robert, Dorian Price, and Jason Teasley. And then Jason Teasley bowed out, leaving just the 3 of them. But they moved to Wednesday to accommodate Dorian's schedule needs. So, I go out on Wednesdays. But they did a great job with it. I've heard part of the review already. I'm glad I wasn't on that review. Boy, if there was one movie made this year that was decidedly not for me, it was Five Nights at Freddy's. Not saying it was bad. Like I said, my kids acted like it was Endgame. Like there was cheering going on. Look, I was there in the theater when the 3 Peter Parkers were on screen and people were throwing their pants and their babies and everything else at the screen. And it was kind of that with these kids in the audience for Five Nights at Freddy's. Like this was a happening. So yes, that review is now in the archives, as is a clip on my TikTok. The night before, myself and Jesse, the 2 best people to discuss feminist pornography, 2 almost 50-year-old men. We talked The Deuce season 2, and I'll tell you, like I said, I cut clips out of my shows for TikTok, and I try to keep it to like 1 or 2. I haven't cut as many more TikToks out of this one show than my last Metal Hammer of Doom, where I cut like half a dozen out. There was so much good conversation in our discussion of The Deuce season 2. Definitely worth a listen in totem. But if you're just like, no, I can only just listen to you 10 minutes at a time, check out my TikTok. Over the next couple of days, I will be uploading various clips from that show, particularly a heartfelt one today about why does no one value me? That went up, and that was a reference to something I said about Maggie Gyllenhaal that I think we can all relate to one degree or another. So that's up. Tonight, myself and Pat Mullen will be concluding our look at Winning Time. We're looking at season 2, which is only 7 episodes long. Thank God. Winning Time is great. It's about, I don't know. I know Sean's a big basketball fan. It's worth a watch.
The Showtime Lakers. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm enjoying it. Adam McKay is an interesting director. It's another one we need to look at some point. He's the, Adam McKay. He did Vice. He did, I think, something else. I don't remember what. Oh, he's a very frequent Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly collaborator. He's the one that did the movie that was on Netflix about the asteroid about to hit the planet, with Jennifer Lawrence. I don't remember the name of it. In any case, so check that out. Next week, we've got No Bananas. No Damn You Hollywood next week, as there's no good movies coming out this weekend. However, Evan Bevins, who I yelled at, will be on, and we will be talking Two Guns. We'll be looking at the book and comparing it to the movie. And then Tuesday, November 7th, Metal Hammer of Doom Jukebox is back. We're going to look at Poppy and whatever else we feel like talking about. Alexis is doing a review for Gen V, which is the Boys spinoff. And that's it. Sean, what do you got going on? I am at Mark Radulich on TikTok. Mark Radulich on X or Twitter, whatever you like. Check me out. All right, now you can go.
Okay, so real quick and dirty update. Usually this is where I mention that I'm on Twitch. I am, however, this episode and the technical difficulties are a good time to point out. I'm soon going to be getting a new laptop. As soon as I get a little bit of a mess with my credit card worked out, I'm going to look into some financing so I can get some better hardware, because I'm so sick of having to do that several times per show. So my streams are going to be on hold for a little bit until then. But in the meantime, if you ever want to hear me wax about personal things, the world around me, hockey, wrestling, music, random shit that goes to my head throughout the day, you can also follow me on Instagram and Threads, and they are all at the name Comer Codex.
Folks, thank you for joining us here on the Long Road to Ruin. We'll be back at, let's see, when is Sean back? Sean will be back in 2 weeks, as a matter of fact. November 16th, we are doing another director focus triple feature. It'll be on David Lynch. We'll be looking at Mulholland Drive, Blue Velvet. I Can Hear Your Fucking Radio, you stupid shit. and Lost Highway. And by the end of it, our brains will be pudding, which is what I'm looking forward to.
Bet if we get this episode of the podcast up to, let's call it 1,000 downloads. 1,000 downloads is pretty fair. We get this up to 1,000 downloads, I will double my dose of edibles and come on to the show absolutely high as fuck to talk about David Lynch.
Okay. With that said, for Sean Comer, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.